Hello everyone, Books with Banks back again with another video, and this is a little slightly different one today. I don't talk that much about science fiction. Talk a lot about fantasy, romance and fantasy, but science fiction was the first kind of window I had into adult fantasy or science fiction. So I figured I would talk about specifically one shelf of books on my larger bookshelf that is full of the science fiction that I love, and that got me into reading the genre, in particular works written with a more adult audience in mind. Before we get to the kind of review and look at or overview of my science fiction shelf, if you haven't liked the video already, it would mean a lot if you could do so. Maybe share this with any friends of yours and family that might also like science fiction. It would mean a lot if you haven't already subscribed, if you could subscribe. Thank you, and without any further ado, let's go to the shelf. We're going down to, it's the bottom shelf on my larger bookshelf. Okay, so there you have it. This is my science fiction shelf, and yes, things are double stacked. So we'll go over the front here. I'll pause briefly, and then we'll go through everything in the back. But in the front here, first, let's look at one of my first favorite science fiction authors. This is Isaac Asimov, and you can see right here is the Barnes & Noble collector's like gold spine edition of the Foundation trilogy. I love this book, this trilogy. I read these probably, I want to say, in the summer of 2013, maybe summer of 2014, somewhere in there. And then, for those of you unfamiliar with the works of Isaac Asimov, all the robot short stories and novellas, I have those collected in these volumes all down here. So that's all the robot stuff. But then going back to the Foundation stuff, here, Prelude and Forward are the two books that come before the main trilogy, and then Foundation's Edge and Foundation and Earth are the two that come after the main trilogy. So we have the 6 main Frank Herbert Dune books. Now, of these two, I've only read the first Dune and the second one, Dune Messiah. I read those for the first time at least 10 years ago or so, and I just recently listened to the audiobooks of those. I am waiting to read Children of Dune and probably God Emperor Dune sometime in sort of the hype build up to the release of part 2 of the movie. So I'll read those maybe end of this year, beginning of next year, something like that. And then, eventually, if I get the bug to or the urge to kind of finish off that series, I'll get to book 5, Heretics of Dune, and then book 6, Chapter House Dune. I love the 2 I've read so far, and I'm really excited to get to these 2, especially everything I've heard about God Emperor sounds like it might wind up being my favorite. Then, moving over one more time to the right, I rearranged my shelves since a video I made almost a year ago, probably at this point, talking about specifically my Star Wars shelf. I've kind of condensed all of that to this section over here. And again, most of these books are written within like the new canon, so they're not the legend stories, but I really do love some of these books here. Of everything that you're seeing here, the only one I have not read is Catalyst, and I know I really should because I really like Rogue One, and from what I understand, it's a wonderful prequel book to that story. But yes, this is the only Timothy Zahn I've read. Before I read any more of his newer stuff, I think I'd like to go back and read some of his older, like the classics Legends trilogy. And then Bloodline, Master and Apprentice, and Lost Stars are all written by Claudia Gray, easily my favorite new canon author in the Star Wars universe. And there's a nice little X-Wing figure. Okay, so there's the front of my science fiction bookshelf. Now, really quickly here, I'm going to remove those so we can have a look at the back, made up mostly by books related to one series, but then with a few other oddities thrown into the mix. So here's the books removed. And here we are. The first layer, before we go to everything back there, let's focus on these. Just a small little handful of books that I have right here. Those Timothy Zahn ones I mentioned. Here are the first two of those. Again, looking forward to reading those, getting into some of the older fiction written around Star Wars. And then we'll move those out. And then going back to where I started with this kind of bottom bookshelf tour, Isaac Asimov. Here are two of the books in his, or actually, sorry, I did Robots and I did Foundation up front, but these books, The Stars Like Dust, Pebble in the Sky, and The Currents of Space, these three all are kind of the loosely considered Empire trilogy, and they all take place chronologically between the robot stories all the way closer to kind of our time and the Foundation series set tens of thousands of years in the future. These all they're very loosely connected, and they all take place in those 10,000 years. So I'll move these, and then we'll talk about everything beyond these. All right, so the back of the Sci-Fi shelf, super full, filled to the brim with books. The kind of glaring, dominating force here are, of course, the Halo Expanded Universe novels. So, the ones that I have read are mostly in this column, starting up there with The Fall of Reach, The Flood, First Strike, Ghost of Onyx, Contact Harvest, Evolutions, Glasslands, Thursday War, Mortal Dictata, and then Greg Bear's Forerunner trilogy down on the bottom. Over here, I've read Cold Protocol, Hunters in the Dark, Broken Circle, just those few on the top. But then there's all those tons of books that I still have to read, many of which are written kind of between two authors, Kelly Gay and Troy Denning. Matt Forbeck has also written 3 of the books there. So I am really looking forward to picking those up again once I kind of get the urge to, maybe give the games another playthrough. I've played through the games a ton. It's one of my favorite series, and I love these books. But so these definitely go on my sci-fi shelf right now. I think they're comfortably sitting in the back of the shelf just because I haven't really gotten the itch to get back into this universe since I played Halo Infinite a lot earlier in like 2022. Again, if something happens with the games, or if I get that urge to get back into them, then I'll definitely give the next few books a try. Probably knocking out those Matt Forbeck books and maybe starting on Kelly Gay's work as well. Moving over to this last kind of hodgepodge collection of books, on the top there we have Michael Crichton's Timeline. I love this book. I actually really loved the movie when I was a kid. In hindsight, it gets so many things wrong, and it's kind of a goofy, really poor adaptation. But reading the book gave me fond memories of how much I used to enjoy that film, but also I was able to appreciate all of the great research and kind of time and interesting time travel mechanics Michael Crichton was playing around with in that book. I really, really love that book. And I should say this is the only Crichton that I've read so far. Beneath that is another Isaac Asimov called The Gods Themselves, and that's not connected to Foundation, Robots, or those in between Empire books, really. It's kind of its own story, and it's a beautiful story. He explores beings who exist and perceive reality in a much different way than humans do. Really fun stuff all about humans' the ability of humanity to just constantly use up resources not really caring where those resources come from. Great story. Below that, 2001: A Space Odyssey by Arthur C. Clarke, written around the same time as Stanley Kubrick was working on the film. Really love this book. I love the film, love the book. I think it's definitely not a case where if you read it or if you watch it, you don't need to do the other. I think they both complement each other very well. Then beneath that, we have the Orson Scott Card stuff that I have, and I did make a video kind of talking about separating art from the artist about Orson Scott Card, but before I really knew anything about the author or things he's said in his personal life, this was one of my favorite early science fiction series. In particular, while the Shadow stuff, all kind of down here, and War of Gifts, a short story there, while all of that is interesting enough and complements the rest of kind of this world that he's made, particularly these main 4 books, Ender's Game, Speaker for the Dead, Xenocide, and Children of the Mind, I think are really brilliant. In particular, Speaker for the Dead and Xenocide, kind of that time period and section of the story is my favorite. If anyone hasn't at least read Ender's Game, and you're comfortable reading things written by Orson Scott Card, comfortable with that sort of separating the art from the artist kind of idea, I definitely encourage you to read at least Ender's Game. If you like that, move on to Speaker for the Dead. Those two are absolutely incredible. Xenocide's a little bit more divisive, but there's elements in that story that I really connected to more than any of the others. Then there's the Shadow Side series, all that stuff. And then the last book here, a classic, Stranger in a Strange Land by Robert A. Heinlein. The only Heinlein I've read, but I absolutely loved it. Very strange story, but I think any fans of science fiction should definitely give some of Heinlein's work a try. This just happens to be the story that I tried. And again, it's the only one I've read so far. So there you have it. That's the back of my sci-fi bookshelf. Sorry, back in focus there. And I'll put all the books back now. So there's everything all back in order on the shelves. My science fiction shelf. And we'll go back up to the normal frame for my videos. So there you have it. That's Books with Banks's limited experience with specifically the science fiction corner of the genre. I do plan on, as I mentioned there, getting further into the Dune saga by Frank Herbert, and also continuing to read more of these classic science fiction authors. And I am always open to any recommendations for modern or classic sci-fi that any of you might want to give me down in the comments below. Thank you all so much for watching. Have a great day. Bye.